We are in Masechet Pesahim. We are in Samech Vav today. We did yesterday the Mishnah in Samech Hey Amoud Bet, near the bottom of the page. And what we're talking about in the Mishnah is Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is something that needs to be brought on the 14th of Nisan. Doesn't matter which day that is. Even if it turns out that it's on Shabbat, we still need to bring the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. So here the Mishnah said, it's bringing machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, his student, that everybody agrees that the shechting, the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach, is on the 14th Pesach, on Shabbat as well. Everybody agrees that burning the innards of the animal, which needs to be burned on the 14th, is on Shabbat as well. Everybody agrees that sprinkling the blood on the Korban Pesach is also on the 14th Nisan as well. Everybody agrees with that. The question is, what do we do with things that are derabanan? Those are doraita. Those are doraita din. These are from the Torah, and they're allowed to be pushed off for Shabbos. What about things with the Rabbanan? For example, there is a wart on the animal. And to cut off a wart with your thumb is a Rabbanan. Because the real way to cut something off is with a knife. If you pluck something off the animal, it's a Rabbanan with your teeth or with your nails. If you carry the animal in the outside of the tchum or in a place where it's a kalmanit, it's a Rabbanan. Are you allowed to carry it on Shabbat? Well, that's a Rabbanan. Are you allowed to do it? Rabbi Eliezer says you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to do it. And Rabbi Akiva says you're not allowed to do it. Rabbi Shia says you're not allowed to do it. One is the machloket. Where does it come from? It comes from haza'ah of a person who is tameh. If a person is tameh, he's not allowed to bring korban pesach. A person that is tameh has a purification process that starts on day 1 and finishes on day 7. Purification process involves sprinkling mechatat on him, and on the 7th day is the last day. There's no problem to sprinkle water on you on Shabbat. There is a problem de Rabbanan though. Problem de Rabbanan is it looks like mitaken gavra. We look like we're fixing a person. What does that mean? The same way you cannot create, your glasses. You cannot make glasses. You cannot make a chair. You cannot make a table from the get-go. You created it. So it looks like you're creating a person. Same thing we said yesterday, that if you take a cup that is tamen, you put it in the mikveh on Shabbat, you're not allowed to. What's the problem? There's no problem, no malacha. It looks like you created the cup. It was not usable, now it's usable, so it's asur. The same with the person. To sprinkle on him, it's asur in general on Shabbat. But not a regular Shabbat. But what about this Shabbat where it's Korban Pesach? If he's tameh, he can't bring the Korban Pesach. If he's tahor, he can't bring the Korban Pesach. Sprinkling the water is a Rabbanan. So do we allow you to sprinkle the water on Shabbat to allow him to shech the Korban on Shabbat? Rabbi Eliezer says yes. And since you're allowed to do that, you're allowed to do everything else. You're allowed to do all the derabanans. This is the derabanan which you're allowed to. So we push off the derabanan to allow you to do the Korban Pesach. And Rabbi Akiva says no, haza'ah you're not allowed to do. It doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do it on Shabbat. So therefore you're going to bring Korban Pesach a month later. Too bad for you. And therefore you cannot do all the things derabanan. That is the machloket. So now we're starting at the top of the page Samech Vav.
What's the chiluk of Rabbi Akiva? Only on that.
He says from there to all the derabanans. Rabbi Akiva learns from Hazah to all the rabbanans, and Rabbi Eliezer learns from there that it's allowed to all the rabbanans that it is allowed. Okay, the Gemara says at the top of the page, Samech Vav, Amar Rabbi Akiva, O chalof. You want to tell me that it's mutar? I'm going to tell you it's asur. Ma haza'ah shi mishum shvut. I could go the opposite way. You want to say that haza'ah is mutar. If haza'ah is mutar, everything else is mutar. Or if you want to know, what did Rabbi I didn't tell you what he said yesterday? Rabbi Eliezer said, if you're allowed to do a doraita, for sure you're allowed to do a rabbanan. If you're allowed to shed down, which is really a Torah prohibition, you're allowed to do that, for sure you can sprinkle water, which is only the rabbanan. Amanu Rabbi Kiba, something about at the top. Oh chaluf, I tell you the opposite. Ma im haza'ah shimushum shvut ena dochat Shabbos. Shrita shel mishum meracha and din shelo ditchat Shabbos. I'll say the opposite. I have a Kabbalah and a tradition that you cannot sprinkle the water. So if you can't sprinkle the water, which is the Rabbanan, then I'll tell you can't even shecht as well. You're not allowed to shecht the animal on Shabbat. Amarnu Rabbi Eliezer Akiva akarta mashikatu b'Torah. You're telling me now that you can't shecht the Korban Pesach on Shabbos? That means you're taking what's written in the Torah. The Torah says bim mo'ado ben b'chol ben b'Shabbat. You're allowed to bring the Korban Pesach. The pasuk says, "Asu b'nei Yisrael et Pesach b'mo'ado." What's mo'ado? In its appointed time. You're allowed to bring it whether it's on the weekday, whether on Shabbos. So what are you telling me, Rabbi Akiva, that we're going to take away the Korban Pesach? Amanu Rebbe, Havani mo'ed le'enu ki mo'ed l'shrita. Okay, I pushed you where I wanted to get you, Rebbe. Rabbi Eliezer, you told me that the word is moado. We're allowed to shech the korban pesach kavis. It's the moed. So I'll agree with you. Anything that is the point, this is the day to do it. But if it's not at a specific day to do it, I won't. That makes no difference. You're not allowed to. Is it today the specific day that you have to purify? No. That has nothing to do with korban pesach. All the derabbanans, when you carry the animal, you had to do that today. You should have done it Friday. You cut off the wart. You're cutting off the wart. You have to cut off the wart today on Shabbat. Do it on Friday. Anything that cannot be done before today, you're not allowed to do it. That you're allowed to do it today. Anything that could have been done, you're not allowed to do it. That's what it is. Kanama Rabbi Akiva. Kol melacha she'efshar la'asota me'erev Shabbat ena dochat Shabbat. You could have done something yesterday. We did not allow you to do it today. You could have carried it. You could have cut off the wart. You could have brought it outside the tchum. You could have purified yourself. Not my problem. You can't do it today. Shrita she'efshar la'asota me'erev Shabbat. But Shrita, the whole korban is Shrita. If you shechted on the 13th, it's not kosher. The korban pesach has to be shechted on the 14th. So if shechted on the 14th, that's kosher. So if it couldn't be done before, it can be done today. That's dochet Shabbat. The Gemara. All that was the Mishnah. Gemara. Amazing Gemara. Tanu Rabbana. Aracha zo nitanma mivnei betera. You know that in the time of Hillel and right before him, you know why there's no machloket before Hillel and Shammai? Because everything was structured properly. How does the Torah see machlokets? How do they see what he's supposed to do with machloket? He's supposed to go to the Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin will make a decision. That's why we have no machloket in David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech and Rabbi Shah, because any problem, two chachamim are disagreeing, we go to the Sanhedrin, there's a vote of 71, and they come out with a psak. At a certain time of the Choban Beit Sheni, we're talking about Beit Sheni over here, which was with the Romans, they started to put tremendous pressure, and it's right a little bit before the Choban Bayit over here. It's starting to get very bad, and there was so many persecutions, and even the walls of Jerusalem were a little bit, broken. It wasn't yet the full destruction, but there was no more gedolim that had the shimush. And what happened was there was no rav that could really take over the Sanhedrin, and they put a family called Bnei Betera, which were aristocratic family, chashuv family, Talmidei Chachamim, but not on the level seemingly to be the Sof Davar, the absolute authority. So Ben Betera, they were leading, and they didn't know the Harban of Korban Pesach. They didn't know this halacha. Pam echad chal 14 liot be'erev b'Shabbat. It was the 14th on Shabbos. V'shachachu v'lo yadu im Pesach doret Shabbat imnav. They didn't know what to do. It was 7 years. They became Nasi the year before. They didn't forget what happens. Shabbat Pesach is not necessarily 7 years before. It could have been 15 years. It could have been 20 years. Shabbat that falls, Erev Shabbat that falls on Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat it doesn't happen very often. So they didn't know the halacha. They're in charge. There was persecutions. They didn't know the halacha. Is there anybody over here that knows the halacha? We don't know the halacha. And don't forget, they're in the Nasi. They're leading the Beit Din. They told them, Hillel, our famous Hillel, who was originally from Israel, he went to Babel, or he was originally from Babel, he came up, he was Meshamesh Shamadev, he went back to Babel. Shemo, Shishimesh Shnei Gdolei Ador, Shemaya ve'Avtalion. V'yodei im Pesach doret Shabbat imnav. So there is Hillel Azaken, who was the friend of Shammai, and he was from Babel originally. He had been in Eretz Yisrael. He was Mishamesh Shamaya ve'Avtalion. You have, of course, Moshe, Yeshua, Skenim, Nevi'im, the Sanhedrin, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and then there was the Zugot. Zugot was, if you read in the beginning of Pirkei Avot, there was about 5 or 6 generations where there was one Av Beit Din and one Nasi. And these are the most two prominent positions. One is the president and one is like the Posek. But they're both Tzadikim Talmidei Chachamim, and they both have different roles, and these are the Zugot that are leading the generation. Who are they? Yeshua ben Bechayim, Nitar Bani, Yosef ben Yochanan, Yosef ben Yozer, Shemaya ve'Avtalion, who were 2 converts. Shemaya and Avtalion were converts, and they were the head of the Sanhedrin. And even though not always it's permitted to do that, but there was nobody else on their stature, so we put them. Shemaya ve'Avtalion, and Hillel was a Talmid of Shemaya and Avtalion, and so he had come back now to Eretz Yisrael. He came from Babel. And what the V'yodeya in Pesach doret Shabbat imno shalchu, so they called him V'karuno. Amru klum ata yodeya in Pesach doret Shabbat. What do we do today? Do we bring the Korban Pesach? We don't. You know, Amar lehem, V'ki Pesach echad yeshnu b'Shabbat, b'shana shadochet Shabbat. What do you think? We only have one korban Pesach? We have 200. V'lo arba yoter mi-200 pesachim yeshnu b'shana shadochet Shabbat. We have 200. What is the 200? The 200 is the tamid. You have 200 korbanot that are brought on Shabbat every year. You have 4 every Shabbat that are brought. There are 50 regular Shabbatot, and then there's Shabbatot that happen on Pesach and Sukkot. And on every Shabbat, there's a tamid that's brought in the morning and tamid brought in the afternoon. The tamid is brought every day. On Shabbat, you also have 2 musafim. When we bring the musaf, it's 1 musaf, but it's 2 animals. So we bring 2 korbanot of the musaf, 2 animals of musaf. We bring 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. So you see that there's 4 korbanot every Shabbat. Make the calculation. There's 200. What are you asking me today? There's 200 korbanot that are brought on Shabbat. Amar lehem. And how do you know? Okay, how do you prove from there? How do you prove from the tamid that we bring the korban pesach? Amar lehem ne'emar muado b'pesach v'ne'emar muado b'tamid. Very simple. It's written muado on Pesach, and that word muado teaches you bring the korban pesach on Shabbos. V'ne'emar muado b'tamid. It's also written that you're going to bring the tamid b'muado. You read it every day. It's Sabbath sen matadem korbanim nachmin nishai reach nichoach lishmu nakriv lo li b'muado. So moed over here means on Shabbos. Moed over here means also on Shabbos. Av moado namur b'pesach dochet Shabbat. Ve'od kal v'chomer. And I'll tell you even another halacha. There is a kal v'chomer. Umat tamid she'en anash karet dochet Shabbat. So tamid, if you don't bring the tamid, what's the punishment? It's not a karet. It's not the soul cut up from its source. Pesach she'anushka she'onesh karet eno din shedochet Shabbat. If you don't bring korban Pesach, you know what the punishment is? It's a karet. So if a tamid already can be brought, then it's not such a big punishment. For sure, a Pesach can be brought. So he brings 2 proofs over here. He brings one is a hekesh, a gzera shava. And I'll just tell you, gzera shava needs to have a kabbalah. You cannot decide gzera shava on your own. When the pasuk says, when there's a word over here that says muado, and a word over here says muado, you need a tradition all the way from your Rebbe, all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu to know that you connect the two and connect the achot. That you cannot just decide. But a kal v'chomer, you can learn it on your own. So we give him 2 svarot over here. One is a gzera shava, and one is a kal v'chomer. Seemingly, after you have the gzera, you don't need another proof. The Gemara is going to ask them in a second. So the Gemara says, what happened? Shoderet Shabbat. Miyad oshivu berosh uminu nasi alehem. You know what happened? They got down from the chair and they put him in charge. You're the new Rebbe. You're the new Rosh Hashanah. They appointed on that day, Erev Pesach, which was on Shabbat, Hillel became the head of the Sanhedrin. And this was always in the whole Shas is going to be a big, big merit for Bnei Betera. That even though they had the authority, even though they were holding the keys, even though they had the seat, and even they were Talmidei Chachamim, it's not that they weren't. They found somebody who knew 1 arachot more than them, he becomes the Rav. Like we told the story a few days ago about the Rashash. It was in Beitel, in the Yeshiva of Mekubanim in Jerusalem. And there was the Rashash who came from Teman. The Rashash was Kodesh Kodeshim. There was the Sidur Rashash on the Kidvei Ari. On Etz Chaim, on the Shara Kavanot, all the Kavanot of the Ari based on Etz Chaim. So the one who really wrote it practical is the Rashash. And see, he was a Gidgul of the Ari. And he came from Teman, and he wanted to remain, under the radar. So what he did is he just took a job as the shamash. He was putting away the books and cleaning the shul. And whenever the Rav of the Beitel would have a problem with Kabbalah, he wouldn't know how to explain the Arizal, they would say, we have a kusha over here, go forward. The next day would find a note in his book that said the answer. So he wanted to know which Talmud was doing that, and they couldn't find the Talmud that was, nobody fessed up. So one day he pretended to sleep, and he was watching, and he saw that there was, or maybe his daughter saw, I can't remember who saw, but somebody saw that. The daughter. They saw the Rashash put it in, they put him the next day, he's the new Rav. He was the Rav. So you see, this is a big merit when you're not looking for your own kavod. That's like we're saying in the Likutei Moharan. When you're not looking for your own kavod, doesn't matter who's in charge. You'll be in charge. The main thing is that there should be more Torah. So here, it's always remembered Zecher Letov, Bnei Bechtel, you sing very good. And if they wouldn't have done that, it would have been a problem because you have somebody that could do better than you, give them the job. So that's what happened. Look what it says. So that whole day he was saying drashot and Achot Pesach. Now, this is really amazing. Hillel, who is the symbol of Anava, even to the point where the Gemara says in the Masechet Shabbat that somebody wanted to bother Hillel and get him mad. He couldn't get him mad. He came to him every Shabbos and kept asking him 1,000,001 questions, making him crazy, and he would not get him mad. And he made a bet with his friend. I bet you I can get Hillel mad. He couldn't get him mad. And Hillel is always calling Mikabed Panim Yafot. The Gemara also says about Hillel that when a person wanted to convert and he went to Shammai and he wasn't happy with him, he gave him a hit and Hillel was Mikarevem, and still Hillel did something seemingly out of the ordinary here. And what did he did? He started to to give a shot, we say, a tochacha a little bit, to Bnei Betera. Mi garam lechem, sharem mibavel, veyed nasi alechem. You know, why is it that I'm the nasi? How come you guys are not the nasi? Atzlut shayeta bechem. You guys were lazy. Shelo shimashtem shnei gedolei hador. If you would have went more, you were there. Shammai and Avdon was there. You would have went more. It's your fault. Your fault that I'm there, because you guys were not mishamesh enough. Hillel was always there. You know that there's a young student. He's always there. He's always listening. No, nobody realizes what's going to become of him until later. Many years later, he became the Rebbe because he was always around. You were great people, but you didn't come enough to the Rebbe. You didn't come enough to Shammai and Avdon. That's why you don't know. And he gave them a little bit. He gave them the tochacha a little bit. And why would Hillel do that? Obviously, this is for him a mitzvah. It seems to be that the tzaddik, as Navi is, his job is to pick up the people. So by giving them a little bit of a rebuttal, a tochacha, it's going to get everybody else around to realize that don't make the same mistake as them. They were not mishamesh. You guys make sure you're mishamesh. So he was doing it for sure, L'Shem Shamayim. So that's what happened. Amrulo Rebbe. Now what happened right afterwards? Something amazing. Amrulo Rebbe. Shachach velo yavi sakin. Meru Shabbat. Mau. So now they ask him another question. Okay, Rav, somebody brought their animal, but they didn't bring the knife. They don't have the knife. So they brought they brought their animal. Yes, they didn't bring their knife. They didn't. You got to bring your knife in the Beit Mikdash and put in Jerusalem. So the next day you're gonna have a knife to be b'shechted. You're going to be a shofar before. You got to bring you before. You can't carry it through it. So he said, what do we do if somebody forgot their knife? I forgot it. The same thing that Bebetera just forgot, therefore he forgot as well. And I don't know what to do, but anyways, there's some skinny over here. Am Yisrael is going to know what to do. They remember what it was. They're going to do the right thing. Let's see what they do tomorrow. They're not prophets, but they're sons of prophets, meaning they were around for a long time and they're going to remember. There's always somebody that's going to remember, and the people are going to do, and that's what happened. Whoever had a sheep would put the knife in the sheep. It's such a fuzzy wool over there that you can actually insert it inside. It's not going to move. A gedi, which is a goat that only has hair. It's like very, very soft, it's not hair that you could stick anything that's going to fall right out. It's very, how do you say, thin hair. Tochabo ben karnav. You would put it between the horns, and he would bring it. Rama seven iskar. When he saw that, he remembered, yes. Those guys are doing it right. That's what it is. I remember now from Shammai afternoon. We see over here, the Gemara is going to say there are two things. One thing is that he got mad. So because he got mad, he forgot his halacha. If you get mad, you forget halacha. Or meaning he was a little bit tough on them, and because he was tough on them, so he actually ended up making a mistake. And what? Yeah. Now, what's the difference between him and Bnei Betera? Bnei Betera didn't know, and he didn't know. So why is he better than them? So actually, we explain his halacha is we can still get by without it. It's not, something happens once in a while. It's not a maaseh, and people remember. But to actually know if you bring korban pesach or not, it's a halacha and maaseh that we need. Whereas one guy forgot a knife, well, one guy didn't forget a knife. We could get by. So his mistake was less than their mistake. But still, because he was a little bit tough on them, he actually ended up forgetting an halacha. So even if you're Hillel, you got to be careful to always stay, even if it's the Shem Shamayim. That's the point. For sure it was the Shem Shamayim. He was Tzaddik Ador. For sure he's doing it for the right reason. Still, that little anger we're going to see on Moshe Rabbeinu. The little anger of Moshe Rabbeinu made him forget the certain halachot we're going to see as well. Amar Mo. Nemar b'moado b'pesach v'nemar b'do b'tamim. Okay, so now let's go back to the proof that he brought that you have to bring the korban pesach on Shabbos. How do we know that? Because on korban pesach it's written moado, and the tamid it's written moado. Ma moado amur b'tamid dochet Shabbat. Moado amur b'pesach do Shabbat. Well, the same way tamid is brought every day, even if it's on Shabbos. So also the pesach is going to be even on Shabbos. Tamid gufa minanan. So how do you know that the tamid is brought? The dachei Shabbat. So it can't be from the word moado, because if you have a question on Pesach, it's written moado. Well, you can't be learning tamid from moado. Can't be that that's the word. You must be learning from somewhere else. Because if we don't know that on Pesach you can bring it because it's in moado, then you can't know that they can bring the tamid. So it must be from somewhere else. And once we know from somewhere else, so then we connect the two with the word moado. Ela moado lo mashmade. Achenami moado lo mashmade. Ela makra olat Shabbat b'Shabbato. Alat al olat hatamid, alat hatamid. So you know that there is a korban musaf. Musaf is only on Shabbat. Musaf is not any other day. It's only on the Yom Tov Shabbat. So we say when the Allah is saying they're going to bring a musaf, it says olat Shabbat b'Shabbato. You're going to bring the olat Shabbat, which is the musaf, an olat hatamid. Adding on the olat hatamid. So if I'm telling you bring the musaf after you brought the tamid, it means you bring the tamid. From that's where we learn they bring the tamid. Now, once we know that, so we know that the muado is connected to the Pesach, and we bring also the Pesach on Shabbos. Bichlad the tamid kavah b'Shabbos. Amal mo. Remember I told you before there was two proofs. Ve'od kal v'chomer. So what did Hillel bring? Two proofs. One is the Gzera Shabbat, and one was the kal v'chomer. But the kal v'chomer is not a strong kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer means if I show, if I can lift up the table, for sure I can lift up the phone. So if I show you that there's a tzad chumra on the tamid, that the tamid you bring every time, and it's not even a kares, so for sure that a Pesach you're bringing a kares. But the kal v'chomer doesn't work. Why? Uma tamid shenu shkared doch et Shabbos. At the Shabbat, Pesach, Shomish Kared, and the Din Shador at the Shabbos, Ikana Mifrach. We can ask you the opposite. Mali Tamid Sheken Tadir Vikalin. There are two things which are more strict when it comes to the Tamid. The Tamid is every day. Maybe the reason to put it on the Shabbos is because it's every day. And Pesach is once a year, so it shouldn't be Shabbos. Second is that you end up eating the Korban Pesach. What happens to the Tamid? It's completely burnt up. Nobody eats it. So you see it's going more to Hashem. So maybe that's why we bring it on Shabbat. So the kal v'chomer is not working. It's not a good kal v'chomer. The Gemara says, Amarnu beresha. So the Gemara explains, kal v'chomer amarnu beresha upachua. So really the way that Hillel came is what he did, is he told them first the kal v'chomer and they broke the kal v'chomer. Amarnu, and then he told them, Amarnu was Gzera Shabbat. Then he did the Gzera Shabbat, which is the word Mu'adam. But the Gemara says, so if he has the Gzera Shabbat, you don't need the Kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer is logic. Gzera Shabbat is the truth. Tradition all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu. If Moshe Rabbeinu told it to you, what do you need to tell me Kal v'chomer? Answers, no, Hillel doesn't need the Kal v'chomer. You guys don't have Gzera Shabbat ben B'Tevet because you don't have the tradition. Then Adam dan Gzera Shabbat me'atzmo. And a kal v'chomer, the Adam dan me'atzmo, yibanuch midan. So really, you guys don't know it because you don't have a Gzera Shabbat, which is understandable. You weren't enough by Hillel, you weren't enough by Shammai, so you don't know all the drashot. So therefore, you don't know the Gzera Shabbat that you're allowed to bring it from the pasuk. But at least you should have done a kal v'chomer. You should have thought, well, Pesach is kares, Tamid is not kares. If you bring a Tamid, so for sure you're going to have Pesach. So you guys should have done a kal v'chomer. That's what he was answering. He wasn't using it for his proof. He told them, you guys should have figured it out without me. And on that, the answer, Amruna kal v'chomer pirchai. And the kal v'chomer is not valid because it actually be a pirchai, could actually be not true. Because the kal v'chomer has a different way of working. You can upschlag, you can break, you can take away the kal v'chomer from the fact that it's every day and it's completely burned. So basically what it was is Hillel shows up. They want to know the Yadacha. He tells them, Kal v'chomer. Don't know, it's not a good Kal v'chomer. Okay, Gzera Shabbat. Really, Gzera Shabbat, I'm telling for you guys. You guys should have done Kal v'chomer. No, we can't do Kal v'chomer because it's a backwards Kal v'chomer. So okay, so I have a Gzera Shabbat, and that is the proper one. We'll just do a little bit more. What time is it?
23 minutes. You're good.
We'll do a few more minutes to make a little leeway. Amar mo, nemachar, mi shepeskot taleh, tocheh bo lo b'tzimro. Okay, so if a guy, we said before that if he didn't bring his knife, what does he do? He puts the knife inside the wool of the sheep. Gedi tochado ben karnav. If it's a gedi, he puts it inside between the
horns.
Huh?
That's for the.
Sure. If you put in the horns, one second. You are using kodashim. You know there's a lechamina. You can't use things to the Beit Mikdash. You're using an animal that's designated for the Beit Mikdash. How are you using a sheep which you're not to use? You're using it to carry. You're not to do that. Answers Kihilen. They did like Hillel told them. Titania. Amru alav Hillel. Mi'amav lo ma'al adam b'barato. There's called Me'ilah. Me'ilah is using something that's owned by the Mikdash. In the Zman of Hillel, he did a patent, a way that nobody should ever do a Me'ilah on a korban. You should never. Nobody ever got the avera of misappropriating usage for something that's owned by the Beit Mikdash. You know why? Because he gave them a special trick. What was his trick? אלא מביאה חולין נזרה ומקדישה וסומך ידו עליה ושוחטה. So what they did is that there's two ways of designating the korban. You can designate your house and then you bring it, but then careful, if you sit on it, if you use it, if you lean on it, if you use it to carry, you navira. Or leave it chulin, leave it mundane, and get to the Beit Mikdash, and right before the avodah, give it to the Beit Mikdash. Now I give it, now I put my hands and now I shecht it. So that way you're going to save any problems of misappropriating usage of something that's not owned by the Beit Mikdash. By the way, Rabbeinu said the same thing. Rabbeinu said if somebody wants to mechazek his imunat chachamim, he should give a neder. Do a neder and fulfill the neder right away. Now, nedarim, the Gemara says, mutav shelo yidov no yikayem. Better not to do a neder than to do a neder and not fulfill the neder. If you say nedarim, you got to put tefillin. You got to eat where tzitzis. You got to eat matzah. That's not your choice. But to do extra things, better you shouldn't say you're going to do them than saying and not doing them. It's more dangerous, the fact of not fulfilling a neder, than actually getting the benefit of the neder. So better not to say nedarim. That's only true if there's a time gaps. But let's say you have money and you take $1,000. You say, I'm going to give it to this poor guy. I'm going to give it to tzedakah. I'm making an end. I'm going to get tzedakah, and you give it right away. That's not dangerous. So because there's no gap. There's no time in the meantime. There's no time in the middle that you can make a mistake. So same thing with the animal. Bring the animal. Give the animal once it. Give the animal in the Beit Mikdash and then shecht it. So the Hillel would tell them to do that. That's why they were allowed to bring the knife.
You need a witness for another?
No.
Oh, you can just have them doing another, and so
Yeah.
it says for any mitzvah you're about to
Any
do.
mitzvah. Yeah. Make an error, do this and do this. Okay, so the Gemara says, but the Gemara asked a quick question when it was done. The Gemara says, Pesach b'Shabbat echi matzi magdishne. 1 second. How can you give over? You cannot give over something and magdish, give over something to the Beit Mikdash on Shabbos. How can you do that? Because we have a Breita. The Breita says, what's a Mishnah? Mishnah is Masechet Beitza. Ditnan en magdishin. Ve'en ma'arichin. Erech is when you give something to the Beit Mikdash and we don't know the price of it. For example, you're not giving yourself to the Beit Mikdash. If a person says, I'm giving to myself to the Beit Mikdash, I don't say that. A person would say that. What happens? We evaluate his worth in halacha. So there's different worths of a male, over 20, under 20, a child, an adult, and then you have to come to the Kohen and he has to give you, okay, you said this, so you owe this much money. We don't do that on Shabbat. Also, what else do we not do on Shabbat? Ven mahmirin. We do not put anything in excommunication. Ven magbihin truma umasro. You also didn't give meiser and truma on Shabbat. You can't do them on Yom Tov, and for sure you can't do them on Shabbos. So you see that you cannot give something to the Mikdash. So how is Hillel telling people bring their korban Pesach and give it on Shabbat? You're not allowed to. Answer to why you are allowed to. When the Mishnah said you're not allowed to, that's things that have nothing to do with Shabbos. Things that are not meant to be given today, that don't have to be given today, you're not allowed to give it. You can give it tomorrow, so we don't let you do it today. Damar Yochanan, אבל חובות שקבוע לזמן מקדישים. דאמר רבי יוחנן מקדיש אדם פסחו בשבת וחגיגתו ביום טוב. You're allowed to give korban pesach on Shabbos. You're allowed to give korban chagiga on Yom Tov. Korban chagiga is an offering that you bring on the Yom Tov. You're allowed to give those on Yom Tov. You're allowed to give this on Shabbos. So that's how Hillel did. Hillel did a good trick that people should only bring the animal and give it to the Beit Mikdash once it's here, and that's why they were allowed to bring their knives inside the wool or the horns of the animals. Biruchim to you.